On January 22, 1943, the morning haze clung to the shattered groves near Point Cruz, and Lieutenant John George crouched behind a splintered stump while listening to distant rifles echo through the humid air. Japanese snipers had held this patch of jungle for 3 days, and every approach remained covered by invisible eyes. The ground felt damp beneath him, and drifting smoke curled between tangled coconut roots where earlier patrols had fallen under precise enemy fire. George steadied his breath despite the chaos, and he quietly adjusted the worn sling on his Winchester Model 70 resting across his knees. American patrol leaders moved cautiously between shattered tree trunks, and anxious whispers carried along the line while they awaited another lethal crack from Japanese rifles hidden deep within the foliage. No one advanced now, and each man remembered the 14 deaths suffered in 72 brutal hours. George understood the pattern emerging across the grove, and the stillness signaled another sniper watching patiently from shadowed branches overlooking the approach. Conventional doctrine urged fire and movement, yet here that method had become suicide, and hesitation ruled every decision shaping the unfolding standoff. He studied the tree line through drifting mist, and the faint shapes merging with broken fronds reminded him of countless hunting trips spent tracking patient deer. The battlefield felt different, yet instinct carried familiar weight, and precision rather than speed promised the only viable path forward. Nearby officers trusted their issued Garands implicitly, and their confidence reflected Army training emphasizing rapid fire over careful marksmanship. George respected the weapon's reliability, yet he recognized its limitations at extended ranges, and he trusted his civilian rifle to deliver tighter groups where accuracy decided survival. The Winchester's smooth bolt reminded him of quiet morning stalking game, and he sensed that this contested grove demanded the same measured discipline rather than hurried volleys. Japanese marksmen exploited every careless movement, and deliberate patience offered the only countermeasure holding realistic promise. Wind drifted lazily between shell-torn palms, and shifting branches betrayed subtle hints of concealed positions where enemy eyes waited for exposed silhouettes. George watched every flutter carefully, and each detail deepened his certainty that instinct, coupled with precision, would outperform standardized battlefield routines. Nearby men tightened their grips anxiously, and their uneasy murmurs reflected fear growing after repeated ambushes across the grove. George felt that burden too, yet he steadied himself deliberately, and he prepared to test his unorthodox approach against enemies who believed they controlled every inch of surrounding terrain. The jungle around Point Cruz remained painfully silent, and the oppressive tension pressed against George's shoulders while he raised the Winchester's Lyman Alaskan optic. In that breathless moment he committed fully, and his civilian rifle, once mocked by officers, became the tool he trusted to break the deadlock. The Winchester Model 70 rested lightly in George's hands, and its polished stock carried the quiet confidence of a tool shaped for hunters rather than soldiers. Officers dismissed it instantly, and they believed a civilian rifle had no rightful place within a modern battlefield defined by automatic fire. The battalion staff laughed openly when George unwrapped the rifle, and their amusement echoed across the tent as they compared it to mail-order novelties sold in sporting magazines. They valued uniformity above experimentation, and any deviation from issued equipment appeared suspicious or misguided. Captain Morris scolded him sharply for bringing the rifle forward, and he insisted that proper soldiers relied on Garands built for rugged combat. He believed the Winchester lacked battlefield durability, yet he never considered that precision could outweigh volume within the deadly environment ahead. The rifle's Lyman Alaskan scope drew additional ridicule, and several officers claimed optics would fog instantly under jungle humidity. George listened carefully without arguing, and he recognized that their confidence stemmed from doctrine built on theoretical engagements rather than lived experiences within sniper-infested terrain. Enlisted men examined the rifle curiously, and many questioned why a bolt-action weapon belonged alongside semi-automatic rifles delivering far greater rates of fire. George responded calmly each time, and he explained that range and consistency mattered more against snipers than raw firing speed. The Model 70's balanced weight impressed a few skeptical observers, and they noted that the rifle handled smoothly despite its civilian origins. These impressions faded quickly under command pressure, and authority reinforced the belief that only military-designed weapons possessed serious battlefield value. George practiced quietly during spare moments, and he learned how the rifle behaved under heat, dampness, and shifting wind. These hours of patient familiarity strengthened his confidence, and he sensed that the rifle offered advantages not immediately obvious to officers dismissing civilian craftsmanship. The rifle's crisp trigger impressed him repeatedly, and each squeeze released a predictable shot that landed exactly where he intended. That reliability contrasted sharply with erratic battlefield conditions, and George trusted this consistency more than theoretical superiority attributed to faster-firing weapons. Rumors spread across the regiment about his unusual preference, and some soldiers joked that he carried a deer gun into one of the Pacific's most unforgiving battlefields. George accepted their humor respectfully, yet privately he felt certain that precision, not fashion, shaped survival against concealed marksmen. The growing body count near Point Cruz eventually forced reconsideration, and whispers began circulating that maybe unconventional ideas deserved attention. George sensed that the grove would soon offer proof, and he understood that once his rifle spoke through the jungle, its performance would silence every lingering doubt. Japanese marksmen tightened their grip on the groves, and their patient shots echoed through humid foliage unseen by American patrols. 14 soldiers fell within 72 hours, and each loss intensified the growing realization that the snipers controlled every trail threading through the coconut stands. The snipers positioned themselves expertly within treetops, and their concealed nests blended seamlessly with tangled fronds that masked faint movement. Americans advancing cautiously along narrow paths felt constant dread, and every rustling branch suggested another hidden rifle ready to strike lethally. Bodies were retrieved hurriedly under covering fire, and small squads dragged their fallen comrades backward through mud thickened by rain. Morale cracked subtly under sustained losses, and soldiers whispered about ghosts, watching from leaves whenever sharp cracks pierced the oppressive afternoon heat. Japanese shooters operated with meticulous discipline, and they fired single rounds before fading deeper into shadowed angles inaccessible to returning fire. Their understanding of elevation created deadly plunging shots, and those angles left American helmets useless against projectiles descending silently from overhead positions. Patrol leaders reconsidered movement patterns carefully, and they reduced exposure by crawling across open patches rather than sprinting upright. Even these adjustments provided limited safety, and the snipers exploited hesitation mercilessly by timing their shots whenever soldiers shifted weight nervously. The groves became psychological battlegrounds quickly, and constant uncertainty sapped confidence from platoons already fatigued by tropical sickness. Rustling leaves preceded sudden death repeatedly, and the consistency of Japanese marksmanship convinced many that experienced hunters awaited them silently. American counter-sniper attempts faltered repeatedly, and riflemen struggled to identify muzzle flashes hidden behind thick vegetation. Scouts climbed coconut trunks, desperately seeking vantage points, and several were killed instantly by shooters anticipating elevated silhouettes against pale morning skies. Commanders recognized a tactical crisis unfolding, and they warned battalion headquarters that the advance would halt unless the sniper threat was neutralized. These reports emphasized the precision of enemy fire, and they highlighted how traditional patrol methods failed within confined groves shaped like natural killing zones. The enemy's patience proved especially deadly, and they waited long minutes between shots to avoid triangulation by nervous squads. This discipline allowed them to dominate successive days of fighting, and their uninterrupted advantage pressured commanders to consider unconventional solutions urgently. Every soldier sensed the battlefield's imbalance growing, and conversations around foxholes focused obsessively on the unseen enemy concealed overhead. With 14 dead in 72 hours, the groves demanded a marksman who matched stealth with precision, and that need pointed directly toward George's unorthodox weapon. In early 1941, Georgia training fields shaped George's conviction that controlled marksmanship outweighed rapid firing under chaotic battlefield conditions entirely. Observing recruits struggle with recoil control convinced him that deliberate shots delivered steadier outcomes compared to hurried, semi-automatic bursts overall. George argued that battlefield smoke reduced visibility, making disciplined single shots more valuable than increased volume from unreliable semi-automatic mechanisms. His assessments referenced European campaign reports indicating soldiers frequently misjudged targets when relying solely upon high-speed firing advantages in practice. He believed industrial shortcuts within early semi-automatic designs compromised accuracy, distracting crews who required dependable precision against fleeting hostile silhouettes. Field instructors documented similar concerns, noting that adjustable sights enabled manual rifles to sustain consistent performance during prolonged engagements everywhere. George's philosophy emphasized the soldier's psychological steadiness, asserting that thoughtful aim helps suppress fear more effectively than rapid sequences disrupting battlefield composure. Training memoranda circulated widely, highlighting that restrained fire improved communication clarity within squads operating under intense acoustic confusion during maneuvers. He maintained that ammunition logistics favored precision, arguing that fewer calculated shots conserved supply lines already strained by expanding global commitments. Quartermasters corroborated his claim. Reporting that misused rounds frequently hindered operations requiring sustained pressure against entrenched fortified positions. George noted that battlefield reports from North Africa demonstrated disciplined riflemen achieving higher lethality despite limited firing rates imposed by harsh terrain. He cited British analyses indicating that methodical fire consistently disrupted enemy maneuver cycles, enabling armored thrusts to exploit weakened defensive coordination patterns. Such evidence strengthened his stance, reinforcing the belief that semi-automatic systems encouraged unnecessary wastefulness incompatible with extended Allied campaign objectives. George insisted that sharpshooting discipline allowed platoons to maintain steadier, operational rhythms essential for synchronizing infantry advances supporting mechanized formations. He further contended that environmental unpredictability required adaptability, ensuring soldiers could compensate manually when mechanical cycling errors jeopardized critical mission timelines. Technical diaries recorded malfunction patterns, revealing that complex feeding systems occasionally failed under dust accumulation common in multiple operational theaters throughout campaigns. George respected evolving technology, yet he argued that wartime conditions demanded reliability surpassing theoretical advantages projected by optimistic ordnance departments. His skepticism prompted further trials, eventually encouraging evaluators to compare sustained manual accuracy against fluctuating semi-automatic performance across varied climatic regions everywhere. Ultimately, George's perspective shaped training doctrine, reinforcing precision marksmanship as an indispensable attribute for soldiers confronting unpredictable engagements across widely distributed fronts. His rejection of semi-automatic doctrine reflected a pragmatic appraisal, grounded in battlefield realities, emphasizing survival through disciplined control rather than unrestrained firepower. A gray dawn settled over the contested ridge, and 3 sleepless days of stagnant fighting weighed heavily upon every exhausted rifleman, forcing commanders to reconsider stalled tactics that offered no progress while enemy marksmen maintained dominance from concealed stone terraces overlooking the shattered valley floor. George studied shifting shadows across the broken farmhouse ruins, noticing a faint glint betraying a concealed position, and he realized that only a single precise shot could collapse the enemy's carefully balanced fire network that had pinned his company beneath relentless pressure since the brutal engagement first erupted. He steadied his breathing against the chilled earth, aligning his sight with disciplined patience, understanding that haste invited failure, and he reviewed every known wind change while recalling training lessons emphasizing calm over urgency, whenever chaos threatened to distort judgment under crushing battlefield strain. The moment arrived when the distant silhouette adjusted slightly, revealing a narrow fragment of exposed helmet rim, and George committed his shot with deliberate precision, releasing controlled force that sliced through swirling morning haze before striking decisively against the hidden marksman sustaining the enemy's entire suppressive lattice. A brief silence followed, unusual yet unmistakable, forcing enemy riflemen to reassess their compromised flank during disorganized murmurs, and their overlapping arcs faltered because the eliminated sniper had coordinated pressure that previously kept Allied squads immobilized across the tree line covering their vulnerable approach lanes. George sensed momentum shifting immediately, prompting nearby platoons to advance cautiously while scattered enemy fire lost rhythm, and officers recognized that the collapse of a single specialist position fractured the opponent's confidence, opening pathways previously denied by accurate counterfire that dominated 3 fruitless days. Infantry elements surged forward, stepping through churned mud and shell fragments while maintaining disciplined spacing, encouraged by the sudden reduction in hostile accuracy, and they methodically secured abandoned pits, left behind by adversaries withdrawing hastily to prevent encirclement. following the unexpected break in resistance. Reports circulated rapidly across battalion lines, crediting the breakthrough to one well-placed round shaping the battle's turning point. And senior commanders emphasized that precision, not volume, had undermined the enemy's cohesion, demonstrating again that deliberate marksmanship remained invaluable despite prevailing doctrines favoring rapid-fire supremacy. Engineers soon advanced to reinforce the reclaimed ridge, installing observation posts where George's single shot had silenced the opposition, and their measurements revealed how effectively the enemy sniper previously controlled the valley, proving that neutralizing one vantage point altered the operational geometry dramatically. As the sun lifted over the hard-won position, George reflected quietly upon the fragile balance of battlefield power, recognizing that decisive moments frequently emerged from disciplined restraint, and his action reminded weary soldiers that concentrated skill, applied at the right instant, could rewrite outcomes shaped by prolonged stalemate. He studied jungle contours carefully, adjusting his firing rhythm methodically, and every correction emerged from disciplined repetition, learned during years of patient hunting practice. His deliberate approach produced surprising consistency, allowing each measured shot to compensate for wind variations drifting unpredictably through scattered palm shadows. He refined breath control relentlessly, exhaling slowly before releasing pressure, and this pattern granted him clarity essential for identifying fleeting silhouettes. His calm technique created narrow windows of stability, enabling precise strikes that shaped outcomes profoundly whenever enemy sharpshooters attempted coordinated disruption across the contested groves. He positioned his elbows firmly, anchoring his stance against exposed roots, and this improvised foundation minimized recoil during repeated engagements, demanding uninterrupted steadiness. His posture transformed rough terrain into functional advantage, granting dependable balance whenever hostile fire forced rapid relocations under intensifying battlefield stress. He employed minimal movement intentionally, preserving concealment while shifting angles incrementally, and this restraint prevented opponents from detecting subtle adjustments. His cautious method produced invisible firing lanes, enabling clinical engagement of hostile positions previously believed unreachable because earlier assaults relied upon hurried maneuvers exposing predictable silhouettes. He studied enemy habits methodically, recognizing repeated scanning patterns controlling their fields, and these observations allowed him to anticipate shifts across dispersed positions. His understanding replaced guesswork completely, enabling targeted shots that dismantled interlocking arcs designed to dominate approach routes through surrounding vegetation. He counted seconds between enemy volleys carefully, timing his responses precisely, and this synchronization allowed him to strike during their transitional pauses. His awareness ensured that each round carried strategic value, turning a civilian rifle into an instrument capable of reshaping tactical geometry visibly. He disciplined his trigger pull rigorously, applying steady pressure uninterrupted, and this technique eliminated wobble that often sabotaged hurried attacks. His smooth execution enhanced accuracy significantly, helping his company regain contested ground after days of stalled progress caused by concealed adversaries, maintaining relentless crossfire. He used natural shadows intelligently, blending his outline against darkened ridges, and this passive camouflage prevented counter-snipers from isolating his position. His instinctive use of ambient cover reflected hunting traditions, transforming familiar habits into battlefield assets when visibility narrowed dramatically under gathering dusk. He tracked small environmental cues diligently, watching disturbed leaves and shifting birds, and these indicators revealed concealed targets invisible to hurried observers. His heightened awareness allowed faster identification of threats, contributing directly to the 11 confirmed kills achieved during 4 rigorous days. He concluded those engagements' understanding skills surpassed technological expectation, realizing disciplined technique elevated simple equipment beyond assumed limits. His experience proved precision remained timeless, demonstrating that patient craftsmanship could dominate chaotic fields where doctrine often favored overwhelming firepower instead of measured excellence. They gathered around updated casualty reports uneasily, recognizing patterns that contradicted long-held assumptions, and their earlier confidence seemed misplaced once evidence indicated a single marksman had reversed momentum. They realized training doctrines emphasized volume instead of precision, creating a widening gap between theory and battlefield necessity. They discussed George's results quietly, comparing them against prior operations, And their disbelief grew as each confirmed engagement aligned with demonstrated discipline impossible to dismiss. They understood individual initiative had compensated for institutional rigidity, revealing limitations inside standardized approaches built around uniform weapon expectations. They examined recovered Japanese positions carefully, noticing clustered bullet impacts revealing unusual consistency, and these details undermined arguments favoring rapid semi-automatic fire. They recognized his slower rhythm produced deliberate accuracy, showing that patience under duress could outperform mechanical advantages previously advertised as decisive. They questioned long-taught doctrine reluctantly, acknowledging that real combat exposed flaws obscured during stateside evaluations, and their conversations shifted toward adaptive thinking previously discouraged. They began appreciating how unconventional methods succeeded because George ignored rules restricting experimentation despite persistent skepticism across his chain of command. They considered implications for future engagements seriously. Understanding hidden threats dominated Pacific terrain relentlessly, and his approach offered solutions unattainable through traditional squad formations. They realized dense vegetation demanded hunters more than textbook soldiers, especially when enemy sharpshooters exploited every canopy silhouette effectively. They debated procurement priorities intensely, recognizing the Model 70's performance challenged conventional logistics planning, and its precision raised uncomfortable questions about ignoring civilian designs. They contemplated whether institutional pride had suppressed innovation, ultimately limiting responses during periods requiring flexible problem-solving. They observed younger officers reassessing their assumptions cautiously, noticing attitudes shift from mockery toward respect, and this transformation highlighted battlefield credibility overpowering entrenched doctrine. They saw that practical success reshaped hierarchy silently, forcing acknowledgement of methods once dismissed as amateur improvisation. They reviewed after-action reports thoroughly, marking patterns indicating decisive influence across operational tempo, and these findings demonstrated his rifle's role exceeded isolated anecdotes. They realized precision killed fear as effectively as targets, restoring mobility across grove interiors previously surrendered to concealed marksmen. They confronted their earlier dismissals uncomfortably, recalling moments when they dismissed his equipment as unsuitable, and this realization pressed them to reconsider how innovation emerged from individual determination, rather than institutional endorsement. They recognized progress often arrived disguised as inconvenience. They ended their discussions understanding that doctrine required evolution, noticing how battlefield necessity stripped away ego, and George's example provided a blueprint for flexible adaptation. They accepted that modern war rewarded minds willing to question certainty, proving knowledge advanced only when challenged by reality. They carried his lessons outward cautiously, sharing observations with nearby companies, and these informal discussions revealed a hunger for practical solutions across units struggling against hidden marksmen. They realized his disciplined approach suited the Pacific's tangled landscapes, allowing infantry formations to reclaim initiative inside territories dominated by deeply entrenched Japanese snipers. They watched squad leaders replicate his slow, methodical scanning technique, adjusting sightlines deliberately, and these refinements improved survivability during patrol movements. They noticed even inexperienced riflemen adopted calmer trigger control, discovering precision steadied nerves effectively when enemy fire emerged suddenly from treetop shadows. They gathered platoons during evening briefings, recounting his engagements carefully, and these anecdotal explanations traveled faster than official memos. They understood word-of-mouth instruction shaped battlefield behavior, particularly when formal doctrine lagged behind on-the-ground innovation, prompted by necessity rather than staff directives. They saw battalion commanders request detailed demonstrations, observing George's stance, breathing, and tempo, and these insights clarified why his hunting background yielded battlefield advantages. They realized controlling micro-movements mattered more than theoretical marksmanship diagrams, printed inside training manuals written for open-field engagements. They began issuing selective guidance encouraging marksmen to modify equipment subtly, adding civilian optics or lighter triggers, and such adaptations spread quietly across rifle racks. They noticed logistical officers tolerated these alterations reluctantly, understanding visible results justified bending regulations restricting unauthorized modifications. They observed regimental intelligence sections analyze patterns from new sniper counters, charting reduced casualty rates, and these improvements strengthened acceptance across leadership circles. They recognized measurable results convinced skeptics more effectively than arguments, enabling his method to evolve into an unofficial standard embraced for practicality. They sent instructors to rear areas, teaching replacements simplified versions of his techniques, ensuring incoming troops arrived with improved confidence. They appreciated how early exposure to deliberate marksmanship reduced hesitation under fire, transforming uncertain recruits into disciplined observers capable of identifying threats without relying solely on volume fire. They recognized entire divisions adopted layered observation posts, modeled after his patient engagement rhythm, and this structure enhanced awareness across advancing columns. They saw decentralized precision replacing earlier dependence on massed suppressive volleys, fostering tactical flexibility shaped by jungle terrain rather than European assumptions. They documented success stories emerging from New Georgia, Bougainville, and Luzon, noticing similar kill ratios achieved by riflemen inspired indirectly by his example. They understood that once ideas proved their worth repeatedly, they gained legitimacy surpassing initial skepticism, reshaping combat expectations silently but decisively. They ended the campaign realizing his lone experiment had matured into a divisional habit, embraced because it worked, and its simplicity allowed universal application. They accepted that innovation could begin with one determined soldier carrying a ridiculed rifle, eventually influencing entire theaters shaped by unforgiving environments demanding adaptable solutions. George's battlefield innovation rippled quietly through the ranks, transforming individual initiative into an informal doctrine that emphasized observation, patience, and measured fire over volume. Platoons began adopting his methods instinctively, learning to identify concealment, control breathing, and time shots with precision, directly reducing vulnerability to enemy snipers' relentless harassment. Commanders noted casualty reports declining in sectors where George's approach spread, and field officers started instructing marksmen in controlled engagement rather than reckless suppression. Word-of-mouth training reinforced these techniques, demonstrating that decentralized learning allowed immediate adaptation while preserving combat effectiveness across units unfamiliar with Pacific jungle complexities and unseen enemy positions. Riflemen adopted his deliberate routines cautiously, adjusting trigger pressure, aiming for critical targets, and maintaining concealed positions. These adaptations minimized exposure, giving small squads the ability to maneuver safely while suppressing enemy snipers' advantage, proving that disciplined, precise marksmanship could protect lives more effectively than numerical firepower alone in dense terrain. Battalion leadership gradually recognized measurable operational benefits, revising standard patrol practices to embed experienced marksmen into every squad. They realized that each carefully placed shot shifted tactical momentum, neutralizing enemy control points and freeing allied forces from static stalemates that previously caused repeated casualties under concealed sniper fire. Training manuals evolved informally, incorporating George's methods into field instruction, emphasizing patience, environmental awareness, and equipment optimization. These adjustments encouraged sharpshooters to experiment safely with optics, trigger control, and positioning, enhancing overall survivability and reflecting practical experience over rigid adherence to pre-existing doctrine designed for conventional open-field combat. Stories of his success spread across islands, inspiring junior officers to replicate his techniques systematically. His influence bridged gaps between leadership and enlisted soldiers, demonstrating that individual skill could dictate larger operational outcomes, and proving that initiative and disciplined precision could redefine standards in lethal, unpredictable environments. The unofficial doctrine emphasized teaching observation first, patience second, and engagement only when targets presented clear opportunity. Platoons trained on rotated cycles through coconut groves and jungle edges, ensuring that practical exposure complemented theoretical instruction, producing riflemen capable of defending positions while minimizing risk under enemy sniper pressure consistently. The psychological impact of George's methods proved significant, boosting morale and reinforcing confidence among soldiers previously paralyzed by unseen threats. Teams moved with renewed determination, relying on precise counters to reclaim contested areas, reducing stress and creating a mindset that encouraged careful execution over panic-driven volleys that previously contributed to unnecessary losses. Field reports recorded significant improvements in survivability, attributing reductions in casualties directly to trained marksmen operating under George-inspired tactics. His emphasis on controlled firing discipline, careful observation, and adaptation to environmental conditions created a multiplier effect, saving countless lives while enhancing the effectiveness of broader battalion operations across multiple engagements. By the end of the campaign, the influence of George's unofficial doctrine was undeniable, shaping sniper instruction and operational planning permanently. The lessons learned reinforced that battlefield innovation often emerges from individuals challenging orthodox practices, and that precise, thoughtful execution could protect thousands and redefine approaches to asymmetric, concealed threats. He demonstrated that disciplined marksmanship using a carefully chosen civilian rifle could outperform conventional assumptions, inspiring a generational shift that emphasized individual precision over standardized firepower inside environments where hidden threats demanded patient control rather than hurried volleys encouraged by earlier doctrines shaped by distant training halls unfamiliar with Pacific realities. He proved that adaptability mattered more than rigid rulebooks, prompting instructors to reconsider long-standing habits and accept that one lieutenant's success offered evidence supporting refined techniques, allowing riflemen across multiple divisions to adopt calmer engagement rhythms shaped by thoughtful observation as shifting conditions required smarter choices under relentless Japanese sniper pressure. He influenced developmental programs quietly, encouraging field officers to integrate practical demonstrations showing recruits how stable positions and deliberate breathing produced measurable advantages, allowing inexperienced soldiers to trust their rifles fully even when dense vegetation concealed determined adversaries, exploiting every shadow to pin advancing formations unexpectedly. He inspired quartermasters and ordnance officers to revisit equipment policies, allowing controlled experimentation with optics and triggers previously dismissed as unnecessary luxuries, enabling widespread acceptance of small modifications that enhanced accuracy significantly without compromising logistical standards maintained carefully throughout extended campaigns fought across unforgiving island landscapes. He shaped tactical planning gradually, prompting commanders to embed designated precision marksmen inside assault echelons, ensuring tightly coordinated advances through vulnerable groves where concealed shooters once halted progress abruptly, disrupting timetables essential for maintaining operational momentum during delicate offensives, demanding reliable small unit initiative. He encouraged institutional humility, reminding leaders that battlefield innovation often emerged from individuals, confronting immediate dangers creatively rather than committees relying on theoretical projections, detached from chaotic realities, allowing grassroots solutions to influence official manuals eventually governing later generations of American soldiers. He helped forge a culture valuing patient discipline, reinforcing beliefs that calm minds performing measured actions under fire transformed tactical outcomes decisively, enabling units previously shaken by unseen threats to regain confidence through proven practices shaped directly by field experience rather than preconceived notions. He illuminated weaknesses inside traditional training sequences, demonstrating that real combat demanded flexible thinking and meticulous technique, convincing senior instructors to adopt updated guidance reflecting lessons learned painfully across Pacific battlefields scarred by weeks of exhausting engagements against elusive marksmen. He affected post-war doctrine significantly, inspiring analysts to trace declining sniper casualties to principles he refined instinctively, acknowledging that his approach anticipated later emphasis on precision, marksmanship embedded across modern infantry structures built for adaptable responses. He left a legacy anchored in sincerity and skill, proving that one mail-order rifle wielded by a determined lieutenant could reshape national training philosophies, ensuring future generations approached hostile terrain with sharper eyes, steadier hands, and a deeper respect for disciplined individual accuracy.